If you're here, you made it to the 6th episode, and that means something. Maybe you stumbled into this saga out of curiosity. Maybe you've been here since the beginning, standing in the shield wall since episode 1, axe in hand and heart on fire. Either way, I see you, and I'm glad you came back. The first 5 episodes were a foundation, a journey through myth, through gods and ghosts, battle cries, and sacred oaths. Each one was a spark, but this one burns deeper. Because today we speak of gold, not just any gold, cursed gold, a ring, a promise, a betrayal. One ring to rule them all, perhaps. But long before Frodo stepped into Mordor's shadow, before Sauron whispered from the void, there was another ring, one crafted not by a dark lord, but stolen from a grieving dwarf. A ring that promised wealth and delivered only death. This is the story behind the story. The ancestor of all cursed rings, the one that forged dragons, doomed heroes, and echoed through time until it landed in the hands of a quiet Oxford professor. And if you think you know where this ends, you don't. Let's begin. Have you ever held something so precious, yet felt it burn from within you? Imagine this, a glittering band of gold shaped by dwarven hands beneath the earth, whispered into creation by a creature who wanted to be left alone. A ring not forged for power, but for preservation. And yet, its magic is not protection, it's multiplication. Gold breeds gold, but so does grief. This is the story of the Ring of Andvari. And if you think you know where this tale goes, think again, because it doesn't just end with gods and dragons. It coils through the centuries. It bleeds into literature. It echoes in the ink of Tolkien's quill, and it hisses like a whisper from the shadows of Mount Doom. This cursed ring is the ancient ancestor of fantasy's most iconic symbol. But unlike the One Ring, it was not crafted to enslave. It was born out of desperation, and it cursed not a world, but a family, a bloodline. And one by one, they fell. Let's set the stage. The world we're entering is that of the Norse sagas, where fate is etched in ruins and whispered by ravens, where gods walk the earth, dragons guard treasure, and dwarves, small though they are, can shake the heavens with a curse. Andvari is no ordinary creature. He is a dwarf, yes, but not the jolly ale-swigging kind. He's a scoundrel, a hoarder of gold, a solitary soul who lives beneath a waterfall in the form of a fish. His treasure, hidden, guarded, and powered by a single object, a ring. The ring that makes more gold. A ring that no mortal or god should ever possess. But, as always, the gods don't ask, they take. And Loki, the trickster, he wants it all. So what makes this ring so dangerous? That's the question. The question that lies at the heart of our episode today. The story of Andvari's ring is not merely a tale of myth. It's a blueprint, a mythological seed buried in the Norse underworld that would later sprout in the mind of Tolkien. It's a tale of how one artifact, innocently forged, can bring ruin to everything it touches, from Andvari to Odin's kin, to Fafnir the dragon, to the legendary Sigurd, and eventually to the pens of 20th century authors looking to recast ancient evils in modern tales. You see, Tolkien didn't just invent the idea of a cursed ring. He resurrected it. He translated it, reimagined it. But the bones were Norse. Andvari's ring is the grandparent of the One Ring. But unlike Tolkien's smooth, whispering gold band, Andvari's ring has a different voice, one that shouts. It screams wealth, it bribes loyalty, and it dazzles kings, and then it dooms them. Now here's what's wild. The Norse ring wasn't forged in fire. It wasn't made by a dark lord. It was a simple treasure of a solitary creature, stolen under duress. But when he lost it, Andvari did not weep, he cursed. He didn't simply say, "Let them who take it suffer." He said, Let this ring and its gold destroy all who possess it. And that right there is the shiver at the heart of this saga. Because it worked. In this episode, you and I will trace the cursed path of this ring. We'll walk through the frost-bitten legend and the sword-scattered battles. We'll meet gods who meddle, dragons who covet, heroes who fall. We'll crack open the ancient saga of the Volsung, and we'll compare it with Tolkien himself. And by the end, you'll see it, the shadow of one ring cast by another. This podcast isn't just about a story. It's about how stories endure. How myths aren't buried, but reincarnated. And how a cursed ring from the mist of Norse lore became the very heartbeat of fantasy as we know it. But before we meet dragons and dwarves, gods and gravediggers, we have to begin at the source, a waterfall, a hidden cave, a shape-shifting dwarf with a name few remember, and a theft that changed the fate of a bloodline forever. Because what happens when you steal gold from a creature who curses with truth? What happens when the ring finds someone worthy? Next, we descend into the depths where Loki meets Andvari and unleashes a curse that echoes across the ages. Long before Middle-earth, before dragons guarded gold, before rings bore the weight of power and corruption, there was a story, not written in ink, but carved into stone, sung in mead halls, etched in ruins, and passed from father to son like a secret too heavy to carry. We begin, not with a ring, but with a world that birthed it. Picture the icy north, wind that bites through the wool, trees like spears, oceans that churn with frost and fury. This is the land of the Norse. To understand the curse of Andvari's ring, you must first understand the Norse mythological cosmos, a vast layered world connected by Yggdrasil, the great ash tree. 9 realms, from Asgard, the home of the gods, to Midgard, the realm of men, down to Svartalfheim, the world of the dwarves. Craftsmen, hoarders, alchemists of metal and magic, and in one dark crevice of that world crouched Andvari. He wasn't always cursed. He wasn't even always a dwarf. Some sources call him Verger, others a bottom dweller, a supernatural being who could shift his shape, choosing the form of a fish to hide beneath a waterfall, clinging to his treasure like a ghost grasping the bones of a forgotten life. But here's where the story slips sideways. Unlike other dwarf hordes in Norse mythology, Andvari's gold was not just a pile of coins or a dragon's bedding. It was enchanted, but not with evil. It was practical. The ring of Andvari allowed its bearer to find and reproduce wealth, like a divine tool for a goldsmith. Not domination, not deceit, just multiplication. This ring wasn't born to curse, it was born to create. So when Loki, the Norse god of mischief, found himself needing to repay a blood price, after, in classic Loki fashion, he got another god's son killed by turning him into a weasel. Long story. He descended into the underworld and cornered Andvari in his cave. What did Loki do? He tricked him. He stripped him of every last coin, gem, and trinket, and finally of the ring itself. Andvari begged to keep just that one, the ring that made more, his last hope of recovering what he'd lost. And Loki refused, so Andvari, broken and burning with grief, did the only thing he had left. He spoke a curse so potent, so pure, the sagas say it changed the course of fate. This ring, and the gold it touches, will bring death to all who own it. Let's pause there. That's the origin story everyone expects, but here's the twist. There's evidence that this tale, this myth of the cursed ring, isn't originally Norse. It may be older, possibly even Eastern, possibly even Greek. Some scholars argue that the cursed ring motif travels across cultures. In Plato's Republic, the ring of Aegis turns men invisible and corrupts them completely. Sound familiar? In ancient Sanskrit epics, enchanted objects bring down empires. Egyptian lore, golden artifacts could bind gods to servitude or unleash chaos. Could it be that Andvari's cursed ring was not Norse-born, but imported? that the idea of a ring with power, not moral power, but narrative power, was a universal symbol waiting for storytellers to claim it. That's where this story stops being just myth and starts becoming a signal, a mythic archetype, a warning, an echo from something deeper in the human soul, the fear that what we crave most might destroy us. Back to the Norse sagas. After Andvari cursed the ring, Loki gave it along with a hoard to a dwarf king as payment for the death of his son. And thus the rot began. From the dwarf king to Fafnir, who became a dragon, to Regin, to Sigurd, the ring passed down like a plague wrapped in silk. Each man who held it thought himself lucky. Each one died. But the deeper surprise isn't the deaths, nor the greed, nor the dragon. It's that Odin knew. Yes, Odin, the Allfather, wise and one-eyed, ruler of Asgard, watched this unfold. In some versions of the myth, it's even suggested that he allows the curse to spread, that he believes some greater end will come from it. Tolkien scholars believe that this is where the whisper begins, the idea that a ring could not just represent greed or wealth, but could bind fate, that it could shape the arc of destiny. So when Tolkien, a lover of Norse and Germanic lore, dug into the old stories, it wasn't just dwarves and dragons he discovered. It was this idea of a ring that could carry doom. But he didn't copy it. He reshaped it, reforged it. Just as Andvari's ring of gold brought forth more gold, Tolkien's one ring was a ring of power that brought forth more power, and then devoured all who tried to wield it. It's not the same ring, but it's the same warning. But before we march forward to Regin and Sigurd and the bloodline shattered by the curse, we must face the creature corrupted first, Fafnir the dragon. Because what if the dragon wasn't the monster? What if the real monster was the ring? If you could become a god, would you kill your father to do it? If you could hoard enough gold to never fear hunger again, would you leave your humanity behind? One ring, one curse, and one brother who said yes. Fafnir, not yet a dragon, not yet a myth, just a son. Strong, cunning, and the firstborn to the dwarven king. The king who had just received the cursed hoard from Loki. It glittered beneath their halls like bottled sunlight. Gold, gems, and at the center, Andvari's ring. The ring that multiplied treasure and was cursed to multiply ruin. Loki had paid the blood price and the gods had left. But the gold doesn't rest. It stirs. It whispers. And it begins whispering to Fafnir. The curse worked quickly. The dwarven king, intoxicated by his wealth, refused to share it. He stood over it like a king stands over his army, forgetting that his sons, Fafnir and Regin, were not soldiers, but wolves. Fafnir killed him in the night, not with fire, with silence, with a blade between the ribs, and the moment the blood hit the stone floor, the gold began to change him. He took the treasure. He took it to a desolate wasteland, and he built no palace, no throne. Instead, he buried himself in a cave, coiled around the treasure like a serpent, and over time became one. Not metaphorically. He transformed. This is one of the oldest stories of shape-shifting greed. Men, through the overwhelming strength of desire, transform. Fafnir loved gold so fiercely that he became the fiercest creature alive, a dragon. And he guarded the gold with all his might, not through sorcery, through lust, through fear, through the curse. Back in the halls of men, Regin watched. He too had wanted the treasure, but he lacked the strength to kill Fafnir. And so he waited. He schemed and, in time, raised a boy, Sigurd. If you've never heard of him, imagine a Viking hero like King Arthur or Hercules, brave, honorable, doomed. Sigurd had never seen a dragon, but he had seen injustice, He listened to Regin's stories of the stolen treasure, the monstrous brother, and the rightful inheritance. And Regin, like all good manipulators, gave Sigurd what no one else would, a cause. Sigurd agreed to kill Fafnir, not for gold, not for glory, but for justice. What happens next is Saga legend. Sigurd digs a trench near the path Fafnir used to slither towards water. When the dragon comes to drink, the boy waits beneath the soil, silent. When the shadow blocks out the sun, when the breath of the beast heats the earth, he strikes. Sword through the belly, fire in the sky, blood like molten bronze pours over the boy, and with him the last remnant of who he was, a brother, a son, a dwarf once driven by desperation, now just bones and legend. But the ring lives on. This is where the curse sharpens its claws, because Regin reveals the truth. He was never honest. The gold wasn't stolen, it was cursed. The dragon wasn't a monster, he was a man. Regin planned to kill Sigurd next and take it all for himself. But Sigurd had eaten the dragon's heart, yes, raw and still hot. The blood gave him something strange, the power to understand the language of the birds. They warned him. Regin's betrayal, the danger of the ring, the gold's curse, all whispered in leaves and wings and wind. So Sigurd, the hero, the avenger of evil, beheaded his own father, not for gold, but for truth. And then he took the treasure anyway, because in the end, the curse always wins. With Andvari's cursed ring in his hands, Sigurd rises as the greatest hero of Norse legend. He slays the dragon Fafnir, claims a treasure tainted by greed, and awakens a sleeping Valkyrie from her enchanted fate. Wait, what? We have a whole episode on Valkyrie, episode 2. You can check it out on YouTube or Spotify. And maybe we'll even do a future episode on these two and their mythic love. With sword in hand, he cut down enemies like wheat and brought kings to their knees. But the ring was never meant to be a gift. The curse follows him, patient and sharp. The end is not far off. But the ring, quiet now, pulsing at his side, waits for the right moment. And that moment comes in the form of love. Love and betrayal, memory lost and regained, a tragic marriage, a burning hall, and Sigurd pierced by a spear from behind by those he trusted most. The last of the line to touch the ring, the last to die by it. A dragon's hoard, a dwarf's curse, a hero's fall, not because they were weak, but because the ring was stronger. And here's what you might not expect. This story, this exact arc, is repeated again and again across ancient Europe. But Tolkien, he fused them all. He took Andvari's curse, Fafnir's greed, Sigurd's tragic flaw, and he made it universal. He didn't just recreate the ring, he recreated the consequences. Because in Tolkien's world, the One Ring doesn't just tempt dragons and kings, it tempts anyone. A hobbit, a wizard, a friend. It doesn't roar, it whispers. And sometimes that's more dangerous. The saga of Andvari's ring isn't just myth, it's a mirror. And when we look in, what stares back is us. So what is the lesson of the cursed ring? Is it simply don't be greedy? Or does the curse run deeper into the marrow of power, the nature of fate, the soul of ambition? Because this ring didn't just end lives, it corrupted love. It turned fathers against sons, brothers into monsters, heroes into betrayers. The Norse myths don't warn us that gold will kill us. They whisper that the love of it might. Let's begin with the most obvious and yet most chilling of its themes, greed. Not the cartoon version of the villain rubbing his hands together over a pile of coins, but the slow, creeping kind, the kind that starts with good reason and good intentions. Fafnir doesn't start as a dragon, he starts as a loyal son, a prince. And he says, Why should my father hoard what should be mine? Fair question. Until it becomes a justification, then a knife, then wings and fire. In the Norse world, greed isn't an isolated act, it's a transformation. The more you love the gold, the more it rewrites your story until you're unrecognizable. Then there's fate. In the Norse cosmos, fate isn't flexible. It isn't softened by mercy or rewritten by effort. It's written in runes carved by the Norns, unchanging. That's why Andvari's curse is so potent. It isn't a spell, it's a sentence. He declares what will happen, and then it does. Not because the gold is magical, but because the story must end the way it's been written. And here's what's fascinating. Tolkien was deeply aware of this theme. He once wrote that the Norse idea of fate profoundly influenced his worldview. And it shows, because in both the Volsung Saga and the Lord of the Rings, there's a terrifying beauty in watching characters make choices and yet still be swept downstream. Frodo chooses mercy again and again, yet in the end, at Mount Doom, he fails. And the ring must be taken from him, just like Sigurd in the end falls, not from cowardice, but from inevitability. The most haunting theme of all is this: the ring knows you. That's what separates Andvari's ring from ordinary cursed artifacts. It's not random. It doesn't punish just anyone. It punishes the worthy. Fafnir wasn't weak. He was powerful, strategic. Sigurd wasn't cruel. He was noble, brave, chosen by the gods. And yet both fell. The curse doesn't go after evil. It hunts greatness. It waits for someone pure enough to shine, and then it poisons them from within. Let's turn the mirror for a moment. Imagine a gift, a ring. You're told it can bring you abundance, power, security. You tell yourself you'll use it for good. But as the gold gathers, so does fear. What if someone takes it? What if you lose it? What if it's never enough? And then suddenly, the thing that freed you enslaves you. This is the deepest truth of the cursed ring. Not that it kills, but that it binds. Not in chains, but in obsession. And here's where Tolkien takes the torch. Because while the Volsung Saga shows us destruction through blood, Tolkien shows us destruction through desire. Frodo becomes possessive, even paranoid. Boromir, brave and good-hearted, is twisted in a few hours. Gollum, once a humble hobbit-like being, is devoured. Tolkien isn't telling us a new story. He's translating an old one. And it's not about a ring, it's about us. What we cling to, what we'd kill for, and what we'd lose to feel in control. Let's not forget the lesson of memory in the Norse saga. Sigurd forgets his enchanting Valkyrie, not because he wants to, because of magic, because of circumstance, and because of the curse. And in that forgetting, she burns. Tolkien reflects this through Frodo's slow erosion. He forgets the Shire, the taste of strawberries, the sound of laughter. By the end of the tale, even home feels like a dream. The price of carrying the ring is everything else. The saga of Andvari's ring teaches us that the curse is never just in the gold, it's in the way it changes you. Because sometimes the greatest evil isn't a dragon, it's the man who forgets who he used to be. We've followed the ring from cave to kingdom, from curse to crown. We've watched it change hands and change hearts. But still one question lingers, curling like smoke. Why do we keep telling this story? Why do cursed rings return again and again in myth, legend, and modern fantasy? Because we need them to. We need cursed rings, hoarded gold, doomed dragons. We need the Sigurds and the Fafnirs and the Gollums and the Frodos. They don't just entertain us. They warn us. They mirror us. They help us say what we can't say in spreadsheets or speeches or polite conversations. That something in us is always reaching, always wanting, and sometimes wanting the wrong thing can undo us. You see, the story of Andvari's ring and Tolkien's One Ring isn't just about what happens, it's about what it touches. It touches kings, it touches thieves, it touches dragons and dreamers. And in the end, it always asks the same question. What would you do? Would you throw it in the fire or wear it just for a moment? Would you keep it? Would you keep it for your family, for your people, for your cause? Or would you walk away? We love these stories because they let us explore the battle without drawing blood, because they remind us the dragon isn't always out there. Sometimes it sleeps beneath our own skin. In Norse myth, the ring is a curse because it amplifies desire. It takes what you want and it turns it into what you can't live without. That's why it's still relevant, because we live in a world obsessed with more wealth, more power, more reach, more success, and sometimes in chasing more, we lose our way. The ring is ancient, but the curse is still alive. We may not find it in the treasure chests or blacksmiths' forges, but we find it in promotions, in platforms, and bank accounts. The question is, what will I become if I get it? The saga ends in fire and betrayal, but Tolkien gave us something the Norse never dared, a fragile kind of hope. Frodo fails, but is still allowed to leave. Gollum falls, but in so doing saves the world. And Sam returns to the Shire. He marries, he raises a daughter, and plants a seed. That's the real goal, the real treasure. Not what glitters, but what grows. We will tell this story again in movies, in novels, in poems, and podcasts, because we always need to remember the ring didn't kill because it was evil. It killed because it was wanted. And that makes it far more dangerous. Here's the twist. Maybe the ring isn't real. Maybe it never was. But the story is true because we know what it means to want something too much. We've seen in our world's history, kingdoms rise and fall, emperors gain power and die in betrayal. We've seen heroes in the spotlight become villains because they had no self-control. You might even say that we see dragons hoarding gold for themselves, unwilling to share. The ring returns, always. In new forms, new names, new tales, it returns again and again and again, in fact and in fiction. But the lesson remains. Not every treasure should be touched. Not every burden should be carried. And sometimes the only way to win is to walk away. If you're still listening, if your heart is still stirred, then you already know. This story wasn't just about a ring. It was about how the ring echoes in all of us. A warning, a whisper, and a choice. You've journeyed deep today, through myth, through fire, through the old songs that once wrapped warriors in silence and seers in shadow. We stood in Andvari's cave, we watched Fafnir turn, we felt the tragedy of Sigurd the hero succumb to the curse, and we followed the path all the way to the edge of Mount Doom, where the echoes still ring. But this story isn't over. Not because there's more to say, but because you are part of it now. That's the thing about these tales. They don't end, not really. They live every time someone speaks of them. They grow every time someone remembers. They change every time a soul sitting in quiet, or by the fire, or at a traffic light, or in grief, when they hear something old and realize it's still true, and maybe, just maybe, it was waiting for them all along. And here's what I ask of you, not as a host, but as a fellow traveler. Don't keep this story to yourself. If it stirred something in you, share it. Share it with a friend. Share it with a stranger. Someone who's fighting their own dragon. Someone who's forgotten the taste of home. You never know what a tale can do. Sometimes a story is just a story. Other times, it's a key. And if you're willing, stay with me. This world we're uncovering is vast. Its legends are old, its lore is deep, but its treasures, they're not made of gold. They're made of memory, of meaning, of the kind of truth that feels like it's been waiting for you just beyond the firelight. If this episode moved you, if any of the first 6 episodes stirred something ancient in you or something unexpected, I have a request. Leave a review. Share what this podcast meant to you. Tell the world what you found here, whether it was truth, beauty, memory, or myth. Then send me an email. Tell me what you saw in those stories and tell me the name you want remembered. In episode 10, I'm going to speak the names of those who stood by me on this voyage, not as listeners, but as companions, like credits at the end of a movie, like shields on a longship, like ruins carved into stone. Your name, or your chosen name, your Viking name, your mythic name, will be read aloud, etched into the digital permanence, carried across the airwaves, honored, because this podcast is for you, not for a crowd. You who stayed, you who listened, you who heard the echoes and answered back. So follow the podcast. Rate it if it helped you see something differently. Leave a review if it reminded you of something important. And send your name to be part of the saga, because that's how stories live on in our age. Not carved into wood, but passed from one soul to another. The ring is only a symbol, but the choice, that's always real. And it's always yours. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode. Until next time, be bold, be strong, and awaken the Viking in you.